Welcome, everyone, to the Transforming the HX podcast Facebook Live. I almost forgot the name of the show because I've done other podcasts today. So I am here tonight with Tara Brown, the connection coach, the amazing connection coach. I think we need to update her title here. And you may remember Tara joined us in early March, I believe it was, right after Nashville went into the lockdown for COVID-19. And we talked about some strategies and tactics there for parents and kids that were going back to, or, going to online school. And so we're going to dive in deeper today into some of these topics. We've had a lot of things change in the last about 3 months or so that we've been in this, or 4 months. I kind of lost track of time, honestly.
Like about 3 years.
Yeah, it's 3 years, 4 years. Where are we at now? But it's the whole point of this show is, and I've went doing this when you joined me last time. You were one of my first guests, actually. So you were my first guest. So thank you for that. Didn't even have a name for the show because it was just like something I was called to do. I felt that, and I leaned into the intuition, and it has been amazing to see what's happened. The wonderful people I've gotten on here. So the whole point of this show, Transforming the HX, is all about bringing people to my audience and helping them, give them a platform, because these are people who are transforming the human experience. They're out there in the world doing something that's making a difference in the world. And I'm honored that they're, my friends. Many of them are my friends. Many of them are people I've worked with at some capacity. And I'm now starting to receive, requests from other people who I don't know as well. And they're saying, hey, I'd love to be on your show. I'd love to be out there to help people. And so I just want to kind of share that, because suddenly the show, after about 2 months, had a name, Transforming the HX, and I haven't explained what it was all about yet. So I want to take that moment as kind of a kickback, because you were the first one that helped me kick this off. Thank you, Tara. I appreciate that. So the world has gone through some craziness, and the reason I wanted to bring you on here is just to give a refresher for anyone that doesn't remember you or didn't have a chance to see the little fancy video I now put out there to promote you. Tara has been a number of things, everything from a teacher in the classroom in some pretty interesting districts, and she can give us a little bit more about that. And now she spends her time really going around the country, and to some extent around the world. And she speaks with administrators of school, with superintendents, with boards of education, with teachers, and she works with them to help them understand how to connect with the students, because the most important thing in the classroom is not just what's being taught. More importantly, it's that connection. And one of her favorite sayings, which we will hear, I know, several times, so I would encourage you, if you're listening to this, go ahead and do a count. Hello. Hello. Do a count for us and keep us honest here. Tara loves to say slinging dopamine. So if you hear the word dopamine or slinging dopamine, let us know you've heard it on the chat here on Facebook. I am monitoring that.
Might turn into a drinking game.
You know what? It might be totally appropriate today. We'll see where we go. There was a point I was thinking about naming this show Bourbon with Bodo, and we just sit here and sip bourbon and have conversations. But there's a certain segment of the audience. I said, well, maybe I should think of something else. So
sign me up for that one.
We'll do that one after hours. How's that? Awesome. So Tara, tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do for anyone that doesn't know you yet.
Well, I've been in the educational world in some capacity since like 1985. And I have taught in some really cool areas, from my rural hometown to gang territory in Long Beach. And my last stop was outside of Nashville, about probably 40 something countries represented at a high school there. So it's been a great journey for me, to allow me to continue to get more tools in my toolbox, and to allow me to figure out how best to connect with very diverse groups of kids throughout the years. And I just felt called about 10 or 12 years ago to try to reach more kids by speaking to more adults. And so I started my consulting company, and it's been a phenomenal journey. I've just met some amazing people. It inspires me every time I go work with a group to see the teachers and the administrators and the superintendents that are still on fire, that are embracing the new research as we learn more about the brain and we learn more about social emotional and all of that. And it it feeds me, because I know that when I'm able to reach teachers and administrators and see that fire in their eyes and the passion that they're still experiencing, I know that that's going to translate. And especially working with the leaders in organizations, it's really, really critical that I'm able to get really clear with them that how they're showing up and that passion and energy, enthusiasm is absolutely going to trickle down to those that they're leading. And kids of all ages need desperately to feel that energy and enthusiasm and passion when they're interacting with adults. I just posted something yesterday. It was a quote from Rita Pearson. And she said it in her TED Talk, and she said it in a lot of her own trainings, the keynotes. Kids don't learn from people that they don't like. And so if ever there was a time for us to be able to really hone in on that and making sure that our energy is powerful, it's now.
Absolutely. And just a quick shout out here. I will let you know that we are being viewed all the way over in Pakistan right now.
Awesome.
Yes, Zubair, he joined us for one of the other shows I did a few weeks ago. Big fan of the guest I had on there. And so he is back. He's the first one to say hello.
Well,
and then
the world. That's awesome.
Yes, and I see some of my friends who are teachers. They were teachers of my kids, or in the school where my kids went to elementary school. They're actually on here as well, so I see them. So a lot of people are going to join us tonight and come through here. And there's a lot of topics I want to cover tonight. And I know you're just this fireball of energy, but also at the same time you have got this tremendous insight. And so I want to tap your brain today as much as I can to really get into what we can learn and what we can do to help other people here. So the thing that's been on my mind lately, and I've been reading some articles around this, and I in the show notes I talk about this ecosystem, the school work ecosystem. And I chose that word very, very deliberately because I don't hear anyone using it, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about how we're syncing these things up. And what I mean by that is we've got parents who from March through June had to figure out either daycare options, or if their kids were still in school online, they had to figure out, how am I going to go, continue working remotely and also help my kids get through school. Mm-hmm. Some school districts, it was optional. Some schools, like my daughter's school, was required that they be on there several hours a day. And so it's a challenge. Now we're moving to the fall. I think a lot of people thought and hoped we'd be through this, but we're moving to the fall. I've seen that the New York City Catholic schools are closed. They're not opening this year, not even for online school. They can't afford it. I've seen that there are different plans in different areas where it may be on 1 week, off a week, or off 2 weeks, from doing from home versus in the classroom. Some are opening up across the board, and they're just opening up school like normal, or sounds like they're doing school as normal, and others still don't have a plan finalized yet. So there's a lot of different people that we're probably talking to and what's happening out there. But this ecosystem, I think, is what matters. We've got schools making decisions independently of the workforce out there. We've got the companies and governments making decisions independent of the school systems. Is there any way in your mind that we can sync this up? Or who has to be talking right now? Who has to have the stage and really say, this is what we need to do?
That's a great question. It's so funny that you mentioned the word ecosystem, because when I do life coaching with my teen clients, I talk about the ecosystem of the family and how everybody plays a part in making sure that that's balanced. So the fact that you would use ecosystem in this larger form, I think is really, really valuable. And I think it's really relevant. And unfortunately, in some of my conversations with colleagues in different districts and clients in different districts, the teachers aren't having a voice. And it's one of these, when you're looking at all of the moving pieces, I think that making sure that the stakeholders that have the primary job and role is imperative. So talking to the parents, talking to the teachers, and importantly is creating an environment that they feel safe to do that. And I think that, unfortunately, is one of the issues right now in some districts, is that the culture and the climate had not been such that now we're in a situation of really tough waters. And it's the best time and most needed for vulnerability and transparency. And yet you have a lot of people who either aren't being asked to share or don't feel comfortable to share. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it's really important, because if you start looking at the different stakeholders in the mix here, we've got kids who maybe they're super spreaders, maybe they're not. There's different opinions about that scientifically and otherwise. But let's say they're not. Let's say they can go to school and they can be in the environment and relatively safe and don't get affected by COVID-19. That would be awesome. I would hope for that. But you have the teachers there. And if the teachers get affected, my concern, is, what do we do? Do we shut the schools down again? We're asking people to go in. We have the front line. We have the nurses, the doctors, and the restaurant workers and the warehouse workers. They've been on the front line, but in a different way. They haven't been in a closed environment like a classroom, where, probably doesn't have the best ventilation system. Let's be honest. Those classrooms are not that great in many cases. And what are we doing to protect them if we're sending them back in the classroom? And even if you believe this is a hoax, those teachers may not believe it's a hoax. And so what are we doing to help them?
And the social emotional well-being of the teachers is imperative, because just like kids can't learn if they're running from lions, metaphorically, teachers can't teach and do their job the way they're needing to if they don't feel emotionally safe, if they don't feel supported by the administration. And that's why I'm saying getting voices from these different places within the ecosystem is imperative. But unfortunately, there are some districts who, through the journey of leadership, have created a climate where, unfortunately, it isn't to where teachers feel like they can be safe to express. And then you have the struggles of each district. It's not a one size fits all. I was talking to a rural district, and the majority of adults in that district aren't wearing masks. They don't feel like it's any big deal. And so that's shaping decisions for the school. And because there's such a majority of views in that direction, a lot of the people who might not feel safe, who do have underlying conditions, who do feel like they need to wear a mask, are hesitant, and they feel like they're being marginalized. And you can take it from district to district, and everything looks differently. I know you mentioned the ventilation system, and I was reading an article a teacher wrote in New York, and she said her windows open about that far. And she said a lot of times, the heat doesn't come on in the wintertime. And so am I going to have the window open that far to get as much ventilation as I possibly can in a room where it's cold because the heat's? And so you have all of these moving pieces in every district that looks different for every group, every population, every mindset. And so then it comes back to, okay, with all of these things that are so varied from place to place, what are some things that each group needs to be doing? And it goes back to your point as far as bringing into the conversation or helping to begin to move the conversation to more than just bottom line data and test scores and back to that stuff that we get so stuck in so often as leaders of organizations. Because this is a time for us to connect as human beings and to see past political, to see past other issues and get down to the realness of teachers and frontline people, secretaries and bus drivers and all that. There's a lot of them that are scared. And when you're talking about actually coming down to, I have a house payment, do I risk my life?
Yeah. Well, and there was a statistic that I read recently. I think it's something like 50% of teachers are over 50 or 55 years old, which puts them very close, if not into that danger zone from an age perspective, regardless if they have any underlying conditions. I mean, just that age factor alone is there. And I think a lot of the bus drivers that I know, that I see, I don't know them, but I see them. They're typically, in that retirement age category as well. This is kind of a part-time gig for a lot of them.
Mhm.
So, I do have concerns there, because if we start to see our teachers, have challenges, then I start thinking about some of those districts where you have single moms. What are they going to do? Grandparents can't be there because grandparents are sheltering, as well, trying to stay safe in that. So they can't be there for backup for childcare. They can't be there to pick their kids up after school, drop them off before school. So there's so many things that I'm not saying none of the schools have thought of. I know a lot of them are, but it's like we've got work doing it here, we've got school doing it here, we've got government doing it over here. I don't see a single place where all of these people have come together and had an honest conversation where they're listening to each other's concerns, where they're bringing the parents in, the having that conversation at a deep level. It's like only the leaders of each of these silos are talking. I may be mistaken, but I have not yet seen that. Have you seen that out there?
Not much. And another troubling thing is leaders who are scared to just say, I don't know. I don't know right now. And I'm telling you, from the receiving end of that, there's some comfort in the
Right.
honesty and the transparency from the leadership to say, look, we're in this together. We're trying to build this airplane while we're flying it. And I don't have answers to this and this and this question, which are very, very good questions that we need to have answered. But right now, I don't have the answer for you. And I think there needs to be more leaders willing to be that transparent and that open, instead of feeling like I have to have all the answers. Because Lord knows we're in a very fluid situation. And then when we think about when we chatted 3 or 4 months ago and where we are today, and we're on the precipice of, we may not have college sports, and colleges are canceling sports programs all over the nation, and the ripple effect of just that one decision. That's the other thing I think that leaders have really got to get clear on, is what is the impact of my decisions or non-decisions, or my transparency or no transparency, on the people that I'm leading. And educators right now are scared. They are scared, and they're stressed, and they're parents, and they're taking care of aging parents, and they've got kids of their own that they've got to figure out what's happening with this. And so that environment that they're stepping into, that environment that they are working in their own ecosystem within their school, that has got to be a safe space for honest dialogue.
Absolutely. And I appreciate, I wanted to have a candid conversation on the front side. I know this may not be popular with everyone, and but I think someone has to have that conversation. Someone has to call it out and say it, because whether you agree or don't agree with what's happening right now, listen, I would much rather we didn't have to close everything down, but we have to do something, because it's clear that people are getting sick and people are dying, and they have been. Maybe the numbers are getting better, and that's a good thing. But I think we have to be aware, because we don't really know what this is. We don't know the long-term effects of it. There's all kinds of research out there saying that even survivors could have long-term effects from this. And because we don't have clarity and transparency around the information, because there's so much confusion, so many conflicting reports, I think it's wise to be prudent and cautious. And I was actually on my other podcast, the Really Know Your Customer podcast, earlier today. We recorded a session with Scott Miller, who is the Executive Vice President of Thought Leadership for Franklin Covey. And he brought up a really interesting point. He said, and we weren't talking so much about COVID-19, but about leadership in general. And he said, leaders have to have vulnerability, humility, and emotional agility. And I was like, that is perfect. I love the rhyming element to it, but that is exactly what we need to have right now, more than ever, more than anywhere else. We went into this situation, I think, thinking it was going to change more quickly. We're coming on the back end of summer now, trying to say, okay, what do we do now? And there's no easy answer. I'm not pretending you or I have the answer, but I do know from all my experience, years of working with customers, listening to the stakeholders, which is what you're saying. So we'll move on from that, because again, we don't have the answer, but we do people need to be heard. And when you and I talked prior to the show, you were relaying some of the stories that you've been seeing in the different districts, and I've been doing my research as well. So I want to make sure we got that out there, so people were aware of that, and so that they could reach out. And if they feel like their district needs to hear something, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, go make your voice heard. You've got to be heard. So let's turn the tables a little bit here. Let's move on to the area where your expertise also shines, which is in connecting. So when we were on back in March, we talked about this idea of connecting. Some of the suggestions that were thrown out there at the time were, kids can use the video conferencing software, things like on their computer or on their tablets or on their phones to stay connected with their friends. There's different ways that families could stay connected like that as well. Where we are today, number one, what's the effect for basically being in lockdown for about 4 months now, I think it is, we're coming up on. And what would you recommend going forward?
Socially and emotionally, this is a really difficult thing for human beings across the globe. We are hardwired to connect. We are fed and we become our best selves when we have great relationships and we connect with others. And so this is a situation that hit us like a ton of bricks, and we're trying to catch up to it. It keeps changing so rapidly. And now we're having to grapple with the thought of, geez, we could be here for a while. This could be our reality. This could be our new normal for a while. That is jarring to us socially and emotionally. That is hard for us. There's a lot that we've had to process over these past 4 months, just with the reality of a pandemic and the racial unrest. If that was the only two things and we were still able to get out and socialize and all that, but you take those two elements, which are huge in this country and around this world, and then you throw in the isolation piece. It is huge. It is really important for kids to be able to interact socially for a lot of their development. And so we already have a problem with kids on their devices. And one of my fears is that the gaming, the hours spent on gaming is escalating. And I know that I can speak from one of my clients, my teen clients that I work with. We're dealing with that issue right now with the hours and hours that are spent online. And I fear that that's something that, because it's hard to kind of get in a routine, and because parents are out there grappling with trying to keep their head above water and deal with everything they're having to deal with at work or not at work, and now I'm unemployed, and now I've got to, all of this stuff, I think that there's probably some issues with lack of routine in a household. Who's monitoring how much face time they're having on devices? How long has that child been sitting gaming? How long have they been sitting on their phone? And so I think for parents, having a recalibration, a reset of, okay, how am I doing, like monitoring? How am I doing with a routine? Do my kids feel like they know what to expect from day to day to day as much as possible in this craziness? Because just the lack of routine is stressful for adults, but even more so for kids. And so there's all of these elements that are flying around that are playing a role in how's a child going to show up in the world? How are they socially and emotionally going to be perceiving the world and the stimulus? And where is my place in all of this craziness? And when you talk about the ecosystem within the structure of the family, how that parent shows up, the energy that parent displays, the level of stress that parent displays, the level of presentness that a parent has with their child on any given day, at any given hour, being present. Those are things in all the craziness. When I've been talking to people, we've got to focus on what can we control, because there are going to be some negative effects on this isolation and everything that we're dealing with. And so us really getting down to what can I control in all of this is one of the biggest takeaways for us every single day. And then if you're a parent on top of that, the component of what am I doing to create a safe, nurturing space in the midst of all this craziness for my kids, which means how am I doing taking care of myself? Am I staying grounded? Am I meditating? Am I making sure I'm feeding my brain good stuff and stepping away from the news? And all of those things are components that we right now can control. And I'm continuing to encourage people all the time, do what you can control and make intentional actions in that regard.
Absolutely. And I think, just what comes to me as you're saying that, what can we control? Breathing is the first thing. Just intentionally breathing, taking long, deep breaths, just calming yourself down by breathing. That is so important because we've got so much stuff going on. I mean, you laid out an excellent case for what's happening right now. And if we don't step back from that and kind of take this meta perspective, like observe what we're witnessing, observing what we're paying attention to. And as you're thinking, I'm sitting there like, you know what? Even my habits have changed where we had some routines that we were going through that were good. And over the last few weeks, because some things that we had happen here, I had to switch up those routines, and I see them sliding in a direction that I'm like, I don't know if I like where it's headed. And so even, I'm a person who practices this awareness, this presence quite regularly. I'm not perfect at it by any stretch, but, and so it's even something that as we get into this, we're developing habits right now. And I think that's critical. It's like we've developed for 6 months, kids. We have never had a group of kids from K through 12 or K through college, really, out of school for 6 months. And that's what we've got by the beginning of August or September, whenever the different schools go back. It's going to be about 6 months, maybe a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. And so that there is going to mean the challenge of them getting back into the mode of learning, of feeling safe, of feeling secure. I mean, it is a real challenge. So what are some things that you'd put out there right now? Like, you do a lot of teen coaching, which I think is awesome. Teen life coaching. That is not something we talked about in the past, but I do think that that's something that's really important that people realize, because I've even had some people reach out to me and say, hey, do you know a teen life coach? Because their teens are struggling, whether it's they might be having challenges with depression or just with anxiety or whatever, any of those types of issues, isolation. So what are some quick things that parents might be able to think about for themselves and for their kids as far as ways to really turn the ship, even if it's just a little bit day by day? What are some things that they can do?
I think the first thing is to really set the intentionality to be present during the day. We are on autopilot so much of our life with getting on our devices and checking out in different ways. We can numb out, we can distract. And I think recalibrating, I talk to parents a lot about recalibrating. You just said, I've been aware over the past few weeks that we're slipping here. That's that moment where you go, okay, we're going to have to recalibrate this. And so for parents, if they're sitting there going, when is the last time that I just had a conversation, just hung out with my kid, just took my parent hat off, set all the lecturing and the teaching and the wisdom and just set it to the side and just flopped on the bed and just hung out? Allowing for those moments of intentionality that says, I just want to be present with my child. Kids are constantly reading our emotions, our energy, our facial expressions, our body language. And so us being aware throughout the day, do I have furrowed brow? I can get really intense when I'm out and about, and I've been told I can be really scary and intimidating. I never wanted that as a teacher.
Well, you're only 7'10" or something like that, right?
Pretty darn close. Yeah. And so I knew for me to be effective and to be able to reach my kids, I had to check myself on some of those things. And so we got to remember that in the household, kids are picking up that energy and that vibe. So one is being present. Every adult in that household being more willing to check themselves and be present, and then carve out time for self-care. We can get zoomed out of our head with all these meetings that we're having. And so carving out time to just say, I am turning off technology, I am getting out of my chair, and I'm doing whatever I need to do for me that's going to allow for me to get back in touch and get myself grounded. That right there, it's almost a lost art for some people. I know that we're in lockdown in some places and we're not wanting to get out very much in other places, but getting sun on our face, getting fresh air where we can, actually sweating on purpose, Sweating on purpose. It's a new concept for a lot of people, Tony. And
we live in
you're
Tennessee,
getting
so we live in Tennessee. So I'm glad you qualified the on purpose
I
part,
know.
because pretty much if you're breathing in Tennessee, you're sweating.
That's why I have to put that in there. So yes, getting some blood pumping and making that decision to say, I'm going to get X amount of steps in today, or else I'm going to do some yoga, or I'm going to just go out and just sit in the sun. Those are things that adults need to be doing. They need to be doing it for themselves, and they need to be doing it to model it for their kids. They need to be helping their kids understand, in all this craziness, this is how I'm going to stay grounded and navigate and model and show you that our world inside this house doesn't have to be crazy just because everything outside is. And kids are looking to that. They want to plug into that. They want to believe there's some port in the storm that they can rely on day to day. I remember when I was in Long Beach, and I had the awareness, it finally hit me upside the head. Because I'm dealing with gang members, I've got kids that are literally risking their life every time they walk out of the door to walk to school. And letting that soak into my pores and realize that level of how they had to live their life just to survive, and know I might not make it home today. That leads kids to want desperately to believe in some semblance of somewhere. And that's one thing that we as adults and parents can do for our kids, is to have that level of, I'm going to model what staying grounded means, regardless of the fact that I am terrified out of my head right now, which millions of Americans absolutely are.
Yeah. So we've got number one, just being present, taking off the parent hat for a little while, flopping on the bed, as you said, and just having that fun little conversation with them, person to person. Number two, self-care, taking care of yourself, getting out there, doing the exercise, doing something. And I'm kind of breaking this one out into number three, which is modeling the behavior of safety. That's kind of my take on what you were just saying there. We do have to be that model for them, so that they can see that even in time. I think that's how we build resilience for them, and help them to see that even no matter what's going on outside of us, I can always find safety within. It's like the waves, the waves of the ocean. Once I go below that surface, it's calm. There's no extra noise. There's no choppiness of the water. It's calm. So somewhere within me, I've got to find that calm, and I've got to be able to help my kids find that as well.
Think of how much they've lost. I mean, there's not been a time in my life where kids over a 6-7 month period have had so much loss, whether it's the little first or second grader that gets ripped out of the classroom and away from the teacher that they love. It's the kids that didn't have their high school graduation or their prom. It's the sporting events during the summer that they're not, or the camps that they've gone to every year, and they're going to look forward to seeing their friends every year at that summer camp, and they're not. I mean, everywhere you turn, there's disappointment. There's disappointment again. It's getting, and so you mentioned resiliency. When parents have that environment where there's an open dialogue and they do have the ability to just be with their kids, it allows for the deeper conversations of, I know you're so disappointed. Tell me what's going on with that. How does that feel? I mean, I know you're really bummed that you don't get to go to summer camp, and you've been looking forward to seeing your friends because you only see them once a year at summer camp. Allowing for kids then to have the environment to process those feelings, and not minimize it. A lot of times adults want to minimize, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic and racial problems, and we're about to lose our house. Well, you don't get to see your friends. Big whoop to deal. No. In the context of their life, it's really a big deal. And so creating that space, just like I'm saying, the leaders of organizations have got to create the space where they can get in touch with their employees' feelings. It's the same exact thing in the home. And realize it's a big deal that second grader got ripped away from that teacher that she loved and jumped out of bed every day and couldn't wait to look in her eyes and see her again. And then all of a sudden, boom, March, done, gone, can't do it. Are you kidding me? And so us really being aware of whether they're 5 or 18, there's been a tremendous amount of loss and disappointment, and just trying to deal and process with my life just got slam dunked, and I don't like it. That's a really, really great jumping off point for parents to be able to build deeper relationships with their kids and allow for, okay, now what are we going to do? How are we going to bounce back from this? And that resiliency piece is so vital. And one of the biggest components of helping build resiliency are positive, supportive adult relationships.
And let's dive into that, because what I want to make clear, and I know you're on the same page with me on this one, what I want to make clear is that being positive or having positive supportive relationships does not mean we dismiss the processing of the unpleasant emotion. It means we process those emotions, and we're that safe space for them to process that emotion. And we then help them to see what good may come out of this. But first, before you start talking the positive thinking, because I think too many people get caught up in the gurus of old who used to, talk about positive thinking, and it was just a bypass. We shut down the negative emotions, pile on top of a bunch of crap down here. Tennessee language here, sorry. Pile on top of all of that crap, the positive, but the negative, the unpleasantness is still there, and it's just going to build and ferment and turn into something really bad. So as parents, as leaders, we have to be willing to step in a place where we probably don't feel comfortable, where it may feel unpleasant for us, because we're going to feel, and as our kids or as our employees, as the teachers, if we're the leaders, as others are processing their emotions and expressing themselves, we are inevitably, as human beings, going to feel some of that emotion, because we're wired to. We socially pick up on it. So we have to be courageous enough to feel those unpleasant feelings so that other people can process them. And then we've got to turn around and we've got to find a group as leaders, as parents, we've got to find a group where we can safely process our own emotions, because we have to let that go as well. We have to move through those as well. So it's not like we can just hold it all inside and let our kids, we have to look for a place to have safety and that as well. So I kind of jumped in there and took over a little bit, but I mean, I want to, let's go down that path of what does it mean? What's a good way to look at and really bring the positive forward so that we can develop true resilience. The one thing that I don't even know what the right description that I'm looking forward to, as odd as that sounds, is that I believe this generation right now, Gen Z, as they're being called, the ones that are typically in probably late grade school to early college right now, Gen Z, I think, has the potential to be the most resilient generation that we've seen in probably 100 years. I really do believe that. And I think even more so than the war. I mean, World War II, you've got the greatest generation. They were resilient, but in a different way. They were heroic, let me say that. I think resilience is something very different. And I think that this generation, if we can help them, are going to be amazing of what they bring about because of that resilience, if we help them develop it.
You made some awesome points, and I absolutely agree with you right down the line, because so much right now is being redefined. And we already know that the younger generations aren't going to be signing up and haven't been signed up for 40 years in a gold watch. That ship has sailed and sunk. And so just in the workforce, if you think about, everything's being thrown on its head right now. And brick and mortar businesses are figuring out, maybe we're not supposed to be brick and mortar anymore. Maybe that ship has sailed and we need to redefine. So just what they're stepping into or will be stepping into, we're in the process of redefining it as we speak. And so their world going out forward into the workplace is going to look different. But when you're talking about the resiliency piece, when we're talking about raising these kids up, it goes back to the importance of, and you mentioned those positive thinkers. I've wanted to choke them sometimes. When I hear them, it's like, oh my God, stop with the daisies and sunshine. It's like, we have emotions hardwired in us, and we were born with 6, 2 of them, fear and anger. And coming from the South, and you know this like I do, definitely anger. That's not one of those things that you want to, everybody got to tamp it down. But I encourage parents to allow their kids to express their anger and express their fear. And so what that means is, you mentioned courageous conversations. That's exactly what parents have got to do to evolve and grow, to step into that place of, yeah, we got to go here. We've got to just acknowledge it's not daisies and rainbows. This isn't good. In the midst of this isn't good, what can we come out of on the other side with by the way we process it? And one of the things that I didn't mention that I want to make sure we throw in when we're talking about these conversations is the writing piece, the journaling piece. I would greatly encourage adults to have that be part of the interaction with kids, to allow. Boys have a harder time articulating their feelings for a lot of reasons, which is a whole nother podcast. But when they're able to get by themselves and have time to write, oftentimes it can be a very healing, productive process. And so creating that space of having that be a tool for kids, and in the midst of them expressing their anger, having the parents encourage them, yeah, you have a right. You got a lot to be angry about right now. And allowing them to know it's okay that I'm bummed or angry or disappointed or scared, because we're hardwired with those emotions. So figuring out how do we process them, that goes back to the positive, supportive relationships that the child feels safe to be able to have those conversations. But the other thing is, you're disappointed, you're angry. Let's step back. And what are some of the things we've learned? What are some of the takeaways? What are some of the blessings? And when you're able to allow the child to get in the muck, but then walk out of it with something in their hand that's tangible, that they can go, okay, that wasn't so bad, because this is that right there, helping them figure out what's the lesson. What did I learn? What can I take away? What skill did I develop? That's a really powerful process of building resiliency. I don't know if you've heard of Sarah Blakely, the CEO of Spanx.
Yep.
Great story. And her father was one of those that did exactly that with his kids. And every time they would be disappointed about not getting in the school play or not having this go the way they wanted, that was one of the things he built into their ecosystem. Let's talk about it. You know, tell me what you're feeling and what's your takeaway from that.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, you got a shout out here from Robin Edwards. She says, hey. And she said, hey, T. So I assume that's Tara, because I don't know Robin.
That would be, yes.
Awesome. So that is a great way to think about this. And one of the things that really strikes me, you were talking about, the coming into the workforce. So Gen Z is starting to go into the workforce now. They're going to hit their peak. Actually, they will peak at, I think, in 2030. The way this generation is kind of structured, and that the years that they're structured in. And what I find really fascinating is, if you look to the millennials, they came into the workforce between 2000 and 2016.
Right.
And at the peak of, or at the midpoint of them coming in was 2008. And if you look at what happened in our economy, they went from buying stuff to buying experiences, because they were like, we lose stuff, but we can never lose our memories and our experiences. So business shifted to adapt, and businesses out there saying, gosh, we're going to make sure that we have good customer satisfaction. We're going to give people a reason to remember us and to remember their experiences. They started to sell experiences rather than stuff in so many cases. Now we're shifting again, and we're shifting to transformation. If we can do what you've just described with our kids in some way to help them to become resilient, to face the emotions, the unpleasant emotions, to express them, and then to pull the lesson out from that, they will be resilient, which is exactly what they need as we move forward into the next 10 and 20 years here, because technology is changing faster than ever before. Absolutely. There are things that they're not even going to think about buying a car, because they won't need to. I mean, the car sharing services are going to be all over the place, and you won't even need to own a car. And I think about my daughters right now. They're both at that age where they can go get their licenses. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. We'll go through it. But, if they were a few years later, that it wouldn't even be worth taking the time. Just get them an Uber or a Lyft or whatever else, right? It's like so as I look at what they're going to be facing, I see what we're going through now. If it wasn't COVID-19, there would be something else. Let's be clear about that. It took the face of COVID-19, but it could be anything. I believe there's these patterns in humanity that when things are going really well, we can't stand them to go too well. We kind of lose faith in ourselves, and that's when we drop back down again. Not all the way down. We drop down, and then we remember who we are, and we stand up again, and we start that hero's journey, and we go back up the hero's journey again, and we'll hit another peak, and we'll lose faith in ourselves, and we'll drop back down. That's just, from my perspective, the course of human nature. Maybe I'm a romantic or a philosophical person. I don't know, but that's just what I see again and again. But I throw all that out there and say is that there's a lot of positive stuff that can come out of this. There's a lot of growth, a lot of opportunity that can come out of this. And so, it's, if you've got your kids at home, and I've also seen, let me throw this in there. I've seen workplaces reimagining what it's like to work there. Last night I had Chris Spinzik on, and he is a recruiter based out of Nashville here, IT recruiter. We were talking about, and because of his specialty in recruiting and IT, he was talking about how literally his market for looking for recruits was 80 to 90% within the 30 miles of Nashville. He can now go national and global because companies have said, hey, we just want the best talent, no matter where they're from. We'll let them work remotely. We'll send them a laptop, let them log in. And so they have to deal with the culture issues. There's changes there. But he's like, this is amazing to see what's happening. So we've got that positive side where, maybe parents have lost their jobs, but that doesn't mean you have to go back and look for a job, 15 miles from your home. You can literally start to look anywhere. Mm-hmm. And you might be in a better position as well. So there's those aspects that I think, sharing that with the kids to say, look at what's happening out there. And this is good stuff for you once we move through this. And we will move through this. Humanity will move through this.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, with you and your daughters, have you had some of those conversations that we're talking about? I mean, have they just organically happened? Have you pursued them? Have your daughters come to you with them?
Yes, and yes.
I figured.
Yeah, so we've had a number of these conversations, and we've talked about a number of things. I mean, you think about it, we've got talks about the economy and what's happening there, right? And my wife, their mom, she works in the restaurant industry, so she has been on the front line. She has not had a day off. And all the employees were essentially they were sent home from this particular restaurant chain. They were sent home for the most part. I think they had a few there while they were doing the curbside pickup and things like that, but it was mostly the managers that were working. All those employees got paid at least a portion of their salary, plus they were getting unemployment, right? So they had time off. I'm not saying boo-hoo. My wife was working the whole time. And so they got to see that happening, and the risk that she was putting herself in to be out there working, right? Because there wasn't another option. It wasn't like all the managers could go home. They had to be the ones that step up as leaders and be leaders, and they had to be on the front line. So they see that aspect of it. They see what that means really. And then they've also, we've had these conversations. We've got the racial elements of what's happening there. We've had some very deep conversations where they've come to me, or we've had those conversations where I go to them. We just kind of organically pop up as we have the mobile quarantine. It's our car that we go out driving around in, keep the windows shut. We don't wear our masks in the car, no, but it's our mobile quarantine. We just drive around to get out of the house. Yep. Yeah. And that in that car, in that time, it's like a sacred space where we can talk about a lot of stuff. And we just kind of let the guard down. We just talk about whatever's on our mind. And there's been a lot of those good conversations there. But there's a lot of other questions like, what's going to happen? What is school going to look like next year? One of my daughters goes online. So, fundamentally it doesn't change for her, but it does change because now her sister's home all the time. Right. Mm-hmm. But what does it mean for my other daughter who is an introvert, but absolutely loves being in the classroom and learning in that classroom environment? What's it mean for her? So we've had to have those conversations where this is going for the future, what it means for them as another topic. I'll just, all the topics you covered. women and empowerment and equality, right? We've had some really good conversations around that, and what's it going to mean for them as they get out in the workforce.
Mhm.
And it's opened my eyes to see what is happening, because we know that there's not equality. We know that there's biases, within each one of us, and whether we want them or not, some of them are intentional, some are not. But we know these are biases. So we've had those conversations, and how do we really be aware of what's driving our thinking and our decision making? Maybe we make a mistake today, but how do we go back and change how we make those decisions in the future? So we've had those conversations, but at the same time, it's like, what am I missing? Where's my blind spot? And that's what I try to keep my eye on, which is, the selfish reason of having all people like you and all these others on this Facebook Live is because I get to chat with you and tap into your expertise, and anyone that has a question, they can do it as well right here in the chat box. But it's like, I know I have blind spots. I have no idea what they are. And so that's where I've got to keep my eyes open and ears open to know that. So as we have those conversations, there's unpleasant emotions rising up with them. I don't want to call them negative, because I don't believe emotions are negative. Emotions are emotions. It's an information system.
There you go.
And so that's why and my good friend Joan Rosenberg, Dr. Joan Rosenberg, she's a psychotherapist and out of Los Angeles area. She talks about them as unpleasant emotions and got me to change my language, and I love that.
Yeah.
But really, we have unpleasant emotions. We're going to feel this unpleasantness, but we have to have the courage to stand in that and allow them to come out, so that we can look at them and say, what is the thinking? What's the belief that's behind that's causing that emotion to rise up within me?
Yeah. I just watched earlier today Chelsea Handler's documentary she did on white privilege. And I was really proud of her for stepping into that arena the way she did. And that's one of the things that they were addressing. What is it that's causing me to react? Why am I getting defensive? Why am I feeling what I'm feeling based on this conversation? And looking deeper into the root causes, exactly what you're talking about is, and being willing to say, I know I have blind spots, and I want people that love me and that I respect and that I feel safe with to knock me upside the head if they need to, and say, there's one right there, because you're right, we're not going to see them. But the willingness to, number one, say we have them and we want somebody to help us see them so we can grow as a human being. What more could you want? I mean, we're all lifetime learners. And you as a dad, having that framework within yourself, having 2 daughters, that's a beautiful gift for you to give them, that willingness to say, what am I missing and what do I need to change and identify within me and my biases, because I've got 2 daughters. And I know that there's things out in the world that it's not fair and equitable that they're going to have to process and deal with. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. I mean, it's, and I'll say from this perspective, and I didn't think about it, they're getting older now. So it's, they're getting to high school and they're headed to college soon, So there's just been this thinking that I've had to go through, is like, I've observed my wife having gone through, getting paid less than men. Right. And it affected me, but for whatever reason, knowing that my daughters might be walking into that scenario, they're equally capable, maybe more capable, and likely going to be paid less, likely going to have a bias in the job selection process, because the statistics are out there. And if anyone wants to argue with it, go ahead. I've got statistics on my side. I don't want to argue, but I want to deal with the issue at hand. And there is a bias there. If we really think about it, let's be real brutally honest here. In America, I want to talk about America. I can't speak to other countries. Women couldn't vote up until 100 years ago. And Nashville was one of the places, Tennessee and Nashville was one of the places that put us over the edge. So I'm proud of being here in Nashville and seeing that. Women couldn't own property in many areas. They couldn't open bank accounts in some areas until the 1950s, I think it was. Mm-hmm. You start to look at how recent that was. Our parents were alive. Mm-hmm. My kids' grandparents were alive during that period of time. And so when we start putting things like that in perspective, we start saying, okay, let's question why this is acceptable, or remnants of this are acceptable today. I think we have to do that. Now, some of us may decide we want to change our mind and go down a different path. Others may say, you know what, I think that's the right way to be, and they may keep going down their path. Okay, I'm not going to be angry at you, but I'm going to call it in question. I'm going to continue to raise the issue as long as I see it out there. And I think one of the greatest gifts I received recently was, I had Dr. David Gruder, another brilliant psychologist. He was on the show about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And we specifically and point blank dealt with the issue of replacing racism and other isms. And he has a brilliant approach to this that we talked about. But one of the things that he really brought to my attention, I've never thought of before, he talked about unearned privilege. So it's not just privilege. He separates privilege into earned privilege, which as a doctorate, with his doctorate and all that, he earned that. He went to college for that. But then there's the unearned privilege. And he said very clearly, he said, if anyone takes another's unearned privilege, it is abuse. Mm-hmm. And then he further clarified, and he said, it's not just today, but if they have taken it in the past, that was abuse. And we have to figure out how to deal with that. And that doesn't just go in the racial side of things. It absolutely does cover the race. I'm not dismissing that, but we can look at women. And I mean, I have that rings true to me because I have 2 daughters and I have a wife, and I see what they have to deal with that I have not had to deal with. I know I haven't had to deal with it. I've had other things to deal with in my life, but not that.
Right.
There's people that have that, I have not had privilege that other people have had. So if I put myself in that position, I see how I was not privileged or didn't have that privilege, I can start to relate to what they're going through, but not really. You know what I mean? I get a whisper of it, if you will, but that's it. And so it's those are hard conversations because for me to really have them, because from one perspective, I don't want them to feel victim. I don't want them to go into victim mentality. I want them to be resilient, but I also want them to face the facts of the situations out there so they're not going out blind.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly.
Knowledge is power. And having those, it's a disservice to not give them the brutal facts of what is out there that they're going to be coming up against. Mm-hmm. We're in 2020. And there are times where my mind is still blown that we are still dealing with some of the discrimination in all of the different facets of society that we're dealing with. It still blows my mind. And so you educating your daughters and other parents having those conversations, it's a disservice not to help them understand this is what it is. It's not fair. It's wrong. It's ridiculous that it's there in 2020, but okay, now you know. So. Yeah. What are we going to do? What tools are we going to give you? What level of tenacity and grit and resiliency are we going to have instilled in you so that you have the best chance to know it's out there?
Right.
Now, what are you going to be able to do to navigate through all the obstacles that you're going to have to navigate through because you're a female, because you're a person of color, because you're from the South and have a Southern accent, because the awareness of that is power.
Yeah.
And talking through and helping kids have that level of, okay, at least I know what the dragons are, instead of me walking out there blind without my sword. We have these conversations with kids. That's what we're doing. We're empowering them, number one, to not be blind to it. And number two, begin to have a reframing of, oh, okay. So when I walk into a room, I'm perceived. Yes, you are. Yes, you're perceived differently.
Yeah.
And if you have a Southern accent and you open your mouth, yes, there's a lot of people that perceive you differently. And so being able to equip them with that awareness, that's going to put them way farther down the road than a lot of kids who have parents that don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations, or we want to keep them shielded from the reality of, no. They need to have a full awareness of what they're going to be facing so that we can prepare them to have the level of confidence to slay those dragons.
It's interesting because this type of conversation is one that I had. I was actually at Vanderbilt in February working with their mid-level, the physicians and researchers that are mid-career. And a big part of the afternoon workshop that I delivered was about how we have these biases, so that they could be aware as leaders what the tendencies are, how women speak, how men speak, how women perceive things, how men perceive things. We were using general categories. We've went into different cultures, but it was eye-opening for some of them because they were like, I did not realize that. And these are very professional people. They didn't realize they had the blind spot, right? And so we did some exercise in that. It was really fascinating to watch that unfold. And I guess what strikes me as we're talking, kind of flipping back over to the kids, it's one thing we've got to arm them. And I love how you word that, with the swords thing, go slay the dragons. And what I have noticed with my daughters is that they're very different personalities. And how they go out and slay that dragon is going to be very different. One I can totally see going down the path of activism and political, not in politics, but like down that path, taking on the political issues, right? The other one, I can totally see being there, doing service behind the scenes and the compassion side of things. Both of them on the same path, if you will, but or headed toward the same destination, but on very different paths.
I want to just jump in here really quickly, because that one thing right there with a lot of parents struggle with is, number one, identifying and embracing the absolute differences in personalities and how kids show up in the world, be it different among the siblings or different from them. And for parents, a lot of time, they do a great disservice to their kids by feeling like because it looks different than the way I would have done it, or I do it, or I operate my life, it puts a child getting crammed into a box and feeling like there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough. And that's another piece of this that you're saying, that you're embracing wholeheartedly, that you got these two beautiful creatures that are so different, and that they're going to go out into the world and they're going to attack problems differently, and they're going to be able to figure them out and solve them. It's just going to look different. And you're sitting there as a dad going, man, give me a front row seat. I want to know how she's going to deal with this. I mean, that's awesome that you're just being able to sit back going, man, yeah, totally different personalities and show up in the world differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because there's that challenge where you're proud of both of them, the path they go down, but because it looks so different, I don't want to say, I like the term success, but there's the significance, right? What's significant for each of them and what you help them to see and praise them in the effort they put in looks very different. And there's that part of me that's like, am I giving each of them what they need? It's like, it's not going to be the same. So what is it that they need? And trying to be really aware of how do they feel most valued and most heard and most inspired to continue to act in a way that I believe is aligned with the values that we're trying to instill in them.
You just nailed a really powerful point. It's identifying, how does each individual child feel seen and heard and validated? What do I need to know as a parent? And maybe that's a blind spot for some parents. What do I need to know as a parent to know how to nurture and feed that child, how to motivate that child and affirm that child? And it often looks very different. Some kids could care less about monetary rewards or pats on the back or. And so a lot of times parents get in a really tunnel vision of how did I respond? How did I get motivated? How do I get fed? And they think, and it's the same thing for people in relationships. You think you're expressing or sharing love with somebody and it's not resonating the way you thought it would, because that's how it's the same exact thing. And so what you said was spot on with, how do I know my child well enough to know how do they need to be fed and nurtured and inspired and motivated? And what does that look like? And is it different than this sibling? And if it is, great. But do I know that? Have I taken time enough to really observe that child and get to know that individual entity, to know that child needs that from me right now instead of this? And that right there, there's a lot of families that's a missing piece, because it stays on the surface and we don't have those conversations. We don't have the safety, and people are unplugged and they're asleep at the wheel, which brings us back to exactly what we were talking about that level of recalibration and being present.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes for families, it goes for organizations, small businesses. I don't care what you're talking about. Whatever ecosystem you find yourself in, there's common themes, and that's helping each individual feel seen and heard and validated. And how does that person need to get that from me? If I'm a principal of a school, if I'm a superintendent with my staff, if I'm a teacher in a classroom, do I know those people well enough to know that that child, that individual, that adult, that administrator needs this or this or this from me as the leader? That would be, if we could recalibrate that right now, man, we could make some serious headway.
It's really interesting. Something just occurred to me as you were reflecting that back to me. And that is, it's not just what inspires and motivates and validates, right? Each one of them. What I've had to learn is that they also get disappointed by very different things than I do. And that's something I've known that subconsciously. I've known that one of them, if something were to happen, it's like, give her 30 minutes of don't talk to her for 30 minutes. Just let her go through it. And about 30 minutes later, she will have processed it her own way. The other one is very much more like talking her through it, letting her process it out loud in the moment. But they're so different. And I learned that when they were doing competitive Irish step dancing, when they didn't perform as well, or the judge came back and maybe they didn't think it was fair, whatever happened. Mm-hmm. I learned it there, but I had never put it into words until just right now, is that they feel disappointment in different ways. Yeah. And the way to handle that disappointment with them, help them to process through that, is very different. So even the things we were talking about earlier is really tapping into where your kids are today. And if you're a leader, where your employees are, where the parents are, where the teachers are, whomever it is, looking at them and beginning to try to understand what actually disappoints them. And then how do they process that disappointment so they get back on top? That's, I think, a critical skill to develop.
Yes, absolutely. And that's tapping into the emotional side of leadership. You having a higher emotional IQ, that's that area where a lot of leaders, unfortunately, are lacking. They might be really, really good at the data and the Excel spreadsheets and the organization, and then there's a disconnect between exactly what you're saying, whether it's on the end of motivation or on the end of helping process through stress or disappointment or fear.
Well, I'm going to do a quick shout out here. There's a couple people that have jumped on here. Tammy Stern, Debbie Laffridge Hatcher. And she says, thanks for the invite.
Well, Debbie was a good friend of mine from this high. We were in Brownies together. So
that's awesome. You were never this high. Let's just be honest.
True story.
So anyone who's watching this and you don't know Tara, she played basketball at college level. Probably could have gone pro, I would guess, if they had pro women's basketball at the time, right?
I was a little ahead of my time.
Yes, but yes. And so one of her stunts, if you want to call it that, one of her things that gets people attention when she's on stage, and I try to throw a few pictures in the promo video for this, is that she'll spin the basketball on her finger. And as long as I played basketball, I could never figure that out. It's a skill and a talent I probably will never try to develop any further, but I never got there. It was like 1, 2, flop.
Growing in the country with a landline, you're on the party line, you got a lot of time on your hands.
That's right. So, and then one of my friends, David Norris, jumps out here. David's actually been on the show too. He's a great friend, brilliant leadership coach. He says children need to be treated as the most wonderful, magical human beings ever, because what they believe is who they become. Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes.
Debbie just chimed in here. She says she always had a basketball in her hands going through school. I can't imagine. Really?
True story. That's true too.
So, we've covered a lot of ground here. I love that people are hearing this, people are chiming in because they're getting it. We started out heavy. We really did. But I think we had to address the elephant in the room. So let's turn a little bit and let's talk about some of those things that just are lighting you up right now. What are some of those things that you see there that are really good that are happening out there that we can kind of attach and hold on to and pull us forward, inspire us?
I think the flexibility that I'm seeing with a lot of administrators and educators is very, very inspiring. And we could apply that to our own life. I told somebody the other day, we got to be flexible like Gumby right now, and I send out videos once a week to some of my clients, just a little short dose of dopamine. And one of the things that I talked about a couple of weeks ago was, you perfectionists out there, you type A's out there, this is a time, this great growth opportunity for you, because it ain't going to be pretty and it ain't going to be perfect. So you just got to embrace the messiness. Just have that be your mantra. Just embrace the messiness. It's not going to look like what you're used to having it look like. So when I am out there talking to clients and I'm seeing that level of, Lord have mercy, we are building the plane while we're flying it, but doggone it, we're flying it. I mean, that right there, that willingness to just jump in. I have a dear friend of mine is an interventionist, and she's in her 70s, and she's Zooming like a pro. She didn't know a dang thing about Zoom, let alone how to connect to it or jump in a room, or she's just all over it. And so that willingness to just say, you know what? Yeah, let's just keep figuring it out. Let's just be willing to make mistakes and just let go of us having to be perfect and having it look a certain way, and just know we're all just muddling through this together. I think the first time we jumped on together, we sat there for probably 3 or 4 minutes. It's like, yeah, it's live. We didn't know it. So we're, okay, but we're here. We're jumping in. So that's something that really does inspire me when I see people just go, you know what? Yeah, I might look foolish. This might not look like what I want it to look like, but we're just going to keep rolling with it and figure it out. That spirit and willingness, that's running rampant through the educational world. And I'm so proud of educators and administrators everywhere that's signing up, suiting up, showing up for the kids and just going, we got to figure this out. And they're doing it. And they're continuing to do it. That's why we just got to keep nurturing and loving on them, because they're crushing it. And the other thing is the healthcare industry and what they're going through. Lord have mercy. I go an hour with a mask on, I'm about to lose my mind. And you think about they're pulling 12 and 14-hour shifts. And so that's inspiring to me when I just see people, the willingness to just say, we're just going to get it done. We got to get from point A to point B. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to get to point B, but doggone it, we're going to get to point B. And they're just jumping in. That's inspiring to me. And I see that everywhere I turn.
I got to jump on there because we did 2 episodes. One of them has been released now on the Really Know Your Customer show, and both of them with the medical field. One of them is a client of mine out of St. Louis, and they've got a wellness facility there. And they talked about how they have shifted to do telemedicine. So most of their practice essentially went away because they were non-essential in certain areas of their practice. And so they flipped so much of it to this telemedicine opportunity. And they're talking about how they were planning to do this a few years down the road, but COVID caused them to have to do it now. And they're like, it's just amazing. The other one, which will be released probably in another 3 weeks or so, I think is when we've got a schedule for. She has been running this female CEO. She's been running a high risk OB practice, but it's all telemedicine. So she does it. She's like based out of the Atlanta area. Mm-hmm. And she's been helping hospitals in Africa, helping hospitals on the West Coast, East Coast, all over the place. And they're doing it. They've got Bluetooth devices that they're sitting there listening to. They've got, it's not Zoom, but, much more secure HIPAA, environment that they can have the specialist on there who, wherever they're located in the world, they have the doctors and nurses that are present physically with the patient at that moment in time with the Bluetooth devices. They get all the readings there on screen. And she said, we've been doing this for 11 years. We've been in business for 11 years doing the high risk OB cases. Mm-hmm. And it's because there's so few specialists. I think Georgia has like 20 specialists, and most of them live around Atlanta. So you figure the rest of the state of Georgia's got nothing. And so what she said though is, because of patient demand, literally legislation that's been stuck for 30 years was pushed through by legislators. She was in front of senators and congressmen and women across the country. She'd been, testifying payment systems, healthcare systems. They wouldn't pay for, would you believe it or not, they would not pay for telemedicine. Even Medicare, Medicaid would not pay for telemedicine. So you forced elderly to go to the hospital or go to their doctor, put them at risk, not just in COVID, but in the past, prior to COVID. They were the first ones to come out and say, wait a second, we're going to pay for telehealth. So props to them, because they're the ones that led the way, and they're usually the slowest. Now everyone else is following them. So if you look at it, I'm inspired because we're seeing the healthcare field. Is it perfect? No. Do they have a ways to go? We talk about that on the podcast, where they have to go yet. But we just moved 30 years that we were behind, and she estimates we actually moved 5 years ahead of where we were. So we've literally moved ourselves 35 years forward in the healthcare system. There's a lot of work we got to do yet, but it's things like that, like you're saying, with the teachers, with the administrators on the healthcare side. That's what I'm seeing that just is inspiring to me. I see CEOs, and this has been a beautiful thing. The more I talk with CEOs, these CEOs are not like the greedy, money-loving, to hell with my people. We've had CEOs on the podcast who they start to cry because, sorry, hits me too, because they know what their people are dealing with.
Yeah.
They're right there with them, and they're inspired because they get to they jump in and they see that their employees, even though they're at home taking care of their kids, or kids are in school, whatever it is, they see them jumping on and doing their work, their commitment to the organization, their commitment to getting things done, their commitment to the customer. And it doesn't matter what field it's in, they see it. And so it's been inspiring to me to watch how humanity as a whole, no matter who we are, gender, race, doesn't matter. It is inspiring to me to see how we are stepping up and finding ways to be creative, to be inspired, to be motivated. And as you said, it's about getting out there and just loving on them. Anyone that's out there doing this and letting them know how much we appreciate them.
Yeah, it is. There's been no time like now that we need those human connections in whatever way, shape, or form that we can give it to one another to sling that dopamine. I had a good friend of mine I saw on Facebook. He had a picture of himself. There was 2 pictures of him wearing a mask, one and right beside each other. And he said on there, "Can you tell which one I'm smiling?" And when I saw that, I said, yes, 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 that, because you could, because his eyes were softer. And his face looked different when he was smiling. And it's those things right there, with us being separated, with us having masks on, that we can still connect here. And we desperately need that. And so allowing for that CEO to be moved to tears when he realizes what his employees are doing because they're so committed to the mission and the vision of his company. We need more of that. We need more leaders being moved to tears. We need more leaders being in that space of here. That right there is so needed right now on every level, in every industry across this planet.
The more we move to a technology-driven environment, I think the more we need to get out of our heads and into our hearts. And I say the need, but I also believe that we are. I see it all over the place. And I see people stepping up and saying, you know what, let's look at this differently. There's another metric here that we've got to measure. It's not just profitability. It's not just how fast we do something. It's how much we care about each other.
If I can recommend a book, The Next IQ, anybody that's leading any organization, I would highly recommend that they read that book. I'm not even through the first 5 chapters, and it's tabbed and highlighted. And she's talking about the IQ, the mindset that leaders have got to have in the 21st century to move their organizations into a different space, which is what we're doing. Like you just said, 35 years in 4 months. I mean, we're moving. And it's those leaders that do have that 21st century IQ. And she does such a great job explaining that. But to your point, one of the things she talks about is we have got to not rely on making decisions based on the way we've always done it and the way it's always looked. And those are the organizations that get stuck and are going to get left behind. And those leaders who have the ability to have the courage to say, let's get more voices to the table. Let's get more people that look different from different places and different mindsets and different worldviews so that we can get the best ideas as quick as possible so we can move forward. That's where great companies are going. And that's what she highlights in this book. It's a very cool concept that we're seeing it in real time. We're seeing it. And she mentions in there the importance of the emotional side of leadership, just like you referenced earlier, is finding that place to where we're connecting on a human level and beyond the data and the Excel spreadsheets and the end of course testing and all of that. And we're getting down to the humanness of us interacting on a deeper level.
Yeah, and it's not just like words here, like, customer experience or something like that. We're talking about having a shared experience with someone, really, really understanding who they are at their core and being able to do that. It's got a couple comments that came in here. David Norris just asked for the name of the book and the author. So it was the new IQ. The new IQ is the book, right?
Tell David I can give him the title, The Next IQ.
The Next IQ. Okay.
Not think of the author right now. It's a female, and that's about all I can give you. But The Next IQ, and it's phenomenal reading for leaders.
I can tell you the next time I talk to David, he's probably going to be like, "Hey, have you read the book yet?" He's going to hold me to task on that. And then Tammy, a few minutes ago, she popped in here and said that she said that you always have a ball close by, even while teaching. So that basketball is going to come back around again. I'm disappointed I don't see one tonight. Oh, here it is. Nice.
That basketball saved my tail many, many times in the classroom. It really did. Yeah.
Nice.
Sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Tara, we've done some good work here tonight. I'm proud of what we've done here. It's been great as always to have you on here to dive deep into this, to help parents learn what they can do, how they can step up in a different way to be there for their kids, how teachers and administrators can step up and be there for the kids when they're in school. I mean, you are the most passionate person I know on this topic, and probably the most well-informed, I would say, in my sphere of influence. And I appreciate you being willing to come on and spend, almost 90 minutes with me here today.
90 minutes?
It's almost 90 minutes. Yes. Time moves fast. And when we actually used to meet at Panera or Starbucks, we'd put 90 minutes on the calendar as our appointment time, and 3-4 hours later, like, oh crap, we're going to miss a phone call or a meeting. So yeah. We could go on for hours. Debbie says you're an amazing person and an inspiration, referring to you. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And look, what you've been doing over these past 3-4 months, Tony, the ripple effect, you have no clue. You probably are starting to see a couple things here or there pop up that you're like, I had no idea. Trust me, the ripple effect and the things that's going to come back to you with all that you're giving, that servant leadership that you have, your willingness to just give because it's beautiful. And I just want to say thank you for that. And it was absolutely thrilling to be able to hang with you again. I look forward to our Panera gigs, but until then, this is the next best thing. So thank you. And thank you for what you're doing for people out there.
Absolutely. I've got to find a mask that I can put a little straw through so we can sip on some adult beverages on the back porch.
Deal.
We're both from Tennessee. We've got to, right?
That's right.
Absolutely. Tammy says time flies with friends, and thank you both for this. Tammy, thank you for being here with us. Debbie, you. David, all of you that have been here. I know there's been a lot of you that have jumped on and jumped off, and if you're watching the replay, thank you for coming through and watching the replay. It's meaningful that I can help. It's meaningful that I can bring people on here. But what matters most is that when we all walk away from this, we can do something better with our lives. We can take a step forward. Maybe we see a blind spot we didn't know we had, and we can grow and learn from what we've heard here. So I learn every time I'm on here. That's why I'm motivated to keep doing these things. So again, thanks everyone. For those of you out there, if you're interested, somewhere around 9 o'clock tomorrow morning Central Time, so that'll be around 10 o'clock Eastern and 7 o'clock Pacific. Takes me forever to translate those. We will be going live. It will be Vinny Ribas and myself doing CEO Secrets. We're going to talk about the second principle, kind of like the second law of business. And that is, you are not the system. Last week we talked about how the business is a system. This week we talk about how you are not the system. So that is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Central or ish. We might be a little late getting on. There might be some
flexibility, fluidness we were talking
exactly. We know that we're going to be on. We just don't know exactly if it's going to be precisely at 9 o'clock. So consider it your warning. If you weren't here tonight and you didn't hear that warning, oh well, you know. Tara, thanks again for being here. I really appreciate it. If you are watching us or watching the replay and want to share this, please share this with your friends, share this with your followers. If you have a school district, or are in a school district that could benefit from Tara's knowledge, her expertise, her brilliance, reach out to Tara, because this is what she does. She helps school districts, helps teachers, helps administrators. She will help your school, your district as well. She'll help you connect and sling some dopamine. We didn't say it as many times as I was expecting tonight, but that's okay. And also, go to Tara's website. I'll let you give your website address because I don't want to mess it up.
theconnectioncoach.org.
theconnectioncoach.org. Go there. Tara has an amazing book, 85. I'll let you say the title again too, because I get it messed up.
Different
85.
cultures, common ground.
Okay.
85 proven strategies to connect in the classroom.
Yes, and this book is amazing, not just for teachers, but parents can read this book and get things out of there too. They can glean some insights from it. So reach out to Tara on her website, get her book. She's got some awesome resources out there. I'm just promoting you because you haven't promoted yourself and you've been giving twice. You've been out here for me, and you are an amazing individual, have some awesome resources, and I just want to see parents, teachers grab those resources and just take off with them, because you do beautiful work. Thank you.
Thank you, friend. You have a great evening.
Absolutely. You too.
All right.